How much freedom is worth? In March 1944, British RAF pilot Lieutenant William Bill Ash sat in a freezing German POW camp called Stalag Luft 6, 800 miles behind enemy lines. He'd been shot down over France 2 years earlier, captured, interrogated, and locked in a camp designed to be escape-proof. Barbed wire, guard towers, searchlights, dogs, routine inspections. The Germans had thought of everything, except one thing. A man with a stolen spoon, infinite patience, and absolutely nothing to lose. For 7 months, Bill Ash spent every night lying on a concrete floor, scraping away dirt one spoonful at a time, building a tunnel 3 feet deep and 60 feet long underneath the camp. He moved 12 tons of earth, 1 handful per night, hiding it in his pockets, his socks, scattering it across the exercise yard where guards would never notice. His hands bled, his fingernails broke. Guards passed within feet of his hidden entrance, but Bill refused to stop, because some men would rather die trying to be free than live safely in a cage. If you want to know what human willpower can accomplish with the simplest tool, subscribe now. This is the story of the prisoner who escaped with a spoon. William Franklin Ash was born in Dallas, Texas in 1917, the son of an oil wildcatter who taught him one lesson above all others: never quit. Not when it's hard, not when it's impossible. You quit, you're already dead. Bill grew up during the Depression, watching his father lose everything in the oil crash of 1929 but refused to give up. That stubbornness ran in the blood. In 1940, Bill was a university student studying journalism when he saw newsreels of the Battle of Britain, Spitfires and Hurricanes fighting desperately against overwhelming German numbers. Britain was losing. America hadn't entered the war yet. But Bill couldn't watch from the sidelines. He traveled to Canada, joined the Royal Canadian Air Force as a volunteer, transferred to the RAF, and by early 1942 was flying Spitfires over occupied France, an American fighting for Britain before his own country entered the war. Bill was good, aggressive, fearless to the point of recklessness. He completed 23 combat missions, shot down 2 German fighters, earned a reputation as someone who'd fly into situations other pilots avoided. On March 24, 1942, that fearlessness caught up with him. Bill was strafing a German convoy near Boulogne when flak tore through his engine. The Spitfire seized trailing smoke. He tried to make it back across the channel, but the engine died at 3,000 feet. Bill bailed out, parachuted into a French field, and was captured by Wehrmacht soldiers within 20 minutes. They interrogated him, beat him, transported him to Dulag Luft Processing Center, then to Stalag Luft III, a POW camp in Poland specifically designed to hold captured Allied airmen. Bill arrived in April 1942 and immediately started planning his escape. His first attempt, tunneling under the wire, caught. 2 weeks in solitary confinement, the cooler, on bread and water. Second attempt, hiding in a garbage truck, caught. 1 month in the cooler. Third attempt, impersonating a German guard, caught. 6 weeks in the cooler. By January 1944, Bill had attempted escape 13 times. The Germans transferred him to Stalag Luft 6 in Lithuania, a maximum security camp reserved for difficult prisoners, the ones who refused to accept captivity. That's when Bill stole a spoon from the mess hall and made a decision. If above-ground escapes weren't working, he'd go underground. And this time he wouldn't tell anyone. No partners, no witnesses, just him, a spoon, and 7 months of silent, solitary digging. The spoon was unremarkable. Standard German military issue. Tin-plated steel, slightly bent, scratched from years of use. Bill stole it during evening mess on February 3, 1944, slipping it up his sleeve while guards watched the dinner line. That night, lying on his wooden bunk in Barrack 7, Bill studied the spoon like it was a religious artifact. This piece of bent metal would either buy his freedom or get him killed. The camp layout was burned into his memory. Stalag Luft 6 sat on flat Lithuanian terrain. No natural cover, surrounded by double barbed wire fences 15 feet apart. Guard towers every 100 yards. Searchlights sweeping constantly. The main gate was 200 yards from the barracks. Beyond that, dense forest, and beyond the forest, 800 miles to Allied lines. Getting over the fence was impossible. Guards shot anyone who got close. But under the fence, that was different. Bill identified the perfect starting point. A corner of the barracks washroom where loose floorboards created a crawl space beneath the building. The guards inspected barracks regularly, but never checked under the floors. Too much work. And prisoners were supposed to be too weak and demoralized to attempt major tunneling. They didn't know Bill Ash. On February 6th, after evening roll call, Bill pried up the floorboards using the spoon's handle as a lever. Beneath was a 3-foot crawl space and hard-packed Lithuanian soil. He lowered himself down, replaced the boards above, and started digging. The soil was frozen solid. Bill scraped with the spoon's bowl, making almost no progress. After 2 hours, he'd excavated maybe 2 handfuls of dirt. His hands were bleeding. The spoon's edge was already dulling. At this rate, it would take years. But Bill had nothing except time and stubbornness. He developed a system: scrape with the spoon, loosen the dirt, scoop it into his pockets, crawl back up, distribute the soil across the camp yard during morning exercise, repeating endlessly, 1 spoonful at a time, 1 night at a time. He calculated the math. The tunnel needed to be 60 feet long to clear the fences, 3 feet deep to avoid detection. That meant moving approximately 12 tons of earth. With a spoon, alone. Impossible by any record. Bill established a routine that would define the next 7 months of his life. 100 hours, evening roll call. Stand at attention while German guards counted prisoners. Return to barracks. 30 hours. Wait for guards to complete their rounds. Lights out. Pretend to sleep. 200 hours. Slip out of bunk. Pry up floorboards silently. He'd wrap the spoon handle in torn shirt fabric to muffle sound. Descend into crawl space. 200 hours. Dig. 4 hours every night. Scrape frozen earth with a spoon that was slowly wearing down to nothing. Fill his pockets with dirt, his socks, his shirt. Every container he could improvise. 200 hours, crawl back up. Replace floorboards perfectly. Collapse into bunk, hands bleeding, fingernails cracked, muscles screaming. 600 hours, morning roll call. Then exercise, walking the yard with pockets full of dirt, casually scattering it near the latrines where turned earth wouldn't be noticed. The physical toll was catastrophic. Bill's hands developed permanent calluses, then infections. His fingernails broke repeatedly. His back seized from hours spent in a 3-foot crawl space. He lost weight he couldn't afford to lose. The German rations were barely enough to sustain life, let alone manual labor. But the mental discipline was worse. Digging for 4 hours meant scraping maybe 3 feet of tunnel progress per week. At that rate, 60 feet would take 20 weeks. 5 months of nightly work with 0 guarantee of success. Every night, Bill fought the voice in his head saying this was impossible, stupid, suicidal. Every night he picked up the spoon anyway. March passed. 10 feet of tunnel. Bill's spoon was now half its original size, worn down by thousands of hours scraping frozen earth. April passed. 22 feet. Guards increased inspections after rumors of tunneling in another barracks. Bill stopped digging for 2 weeks, terrified they'd discover his work. Then resumed because stopping meant surrender. May passed. 35 feet. Bill caught dysentery from contaminated water, lost 8 pounds in 2 weeks. Kept digging anyway. June came. 48 feet. The tunnel was nearly complete. 12 more feet, and Bill would be under the outer fence ready to surface beyond the searchlights. That's when he hit the rock. June 15th, 1944. Bill descended into the tunnel like he'd done 127 times before, spoon in hand, ready for another 4-hour shift. He crawled to the tunnel's end, 48 feet from the barracks, and started scraping. The spoon hit something that didn't give. Not frozen earth, not roots. Rock. Bill scraped harder. The rock extended left, right, down. A boulder, maybe 3 feet across, directly in his tunnel's path. Too big to dig around in the confined space. Too hard to break with a worn-down spoon. He stared at it in the darkness, understanding what this meant. 7 months of work. 127 nights. 12 tons of earth moved. hands destroyed, body broken, all stopped by geology. Bill could go back, start a new tunnel from a different angle. That would mean another 7 months, assuming his body could survive it, assuming the guards didn't discover the existing tunnel, assuming he had another 7 months before the war ended, or the camp was evacuated, or he died from malnutrition, or he could quit. Except that some obstacles are too big. Live out the war as a prisoner, go home when it was over, assuming he survived. Bill pressed his forehead against the cold rock and felt something crack inside him. Not his spirit breaking, but something harder crystallizing. His father's voice, "You quit, you're already dead." He wasn't dead, not yet. If he couldn't go through the rock, he'd go around it. Not horizontally, the crawl space was too narrow. But down. Dig beneath the boulder, squeeze under it, continue the tunnel on the other side. It would mean excavating an additional chamber, moving even more earth, extending the timeline by weeks. But it was possible. Bill started digging downward. The spoon, now worn to half its original size, scraped at the hard-packed soil beneath the boulder. Progress was agonizing. 1 inch per hour, 2 inches per night, June 16th, 2 inches deeper. June 17th, 4 inches total. June 20th, 8 inches. Bill could fit his arm beneath the boulder. June 25th, 14 inches. He could fit his head and shoulders. June 30th, 20 inches. He could squeeze his entire body underneath. On July 1st, 1944, Bill Ash crawled beneath the boulder that should have ended his escape, emerged on the other side, and continued digging toward freedom. 12 feet to go. July 18th, 1944. 7 months after Bill stole a spoon from the mess hall, the tunnel reached 62 feet, 2 feet beyond the outer fence's foundation. Bill scraped upward cautiously, testing the soil above, checking for the surface. His spoon, now, barely 3 inches long, edges rounded to July 18th, 1944. 7 months after Bill stole a spoon from the mess hall, the tunnel reached 62 feet, 2 feet beyond the outer fence's foundation. Bill scraped upward cautiously, testing the soil above, checking for the surface. His spoon, now barely 3 inches long, edges rounded to uselessness, broke through. Night air rushed into the tunnel. Bill had done it. He waited 3 more days, watching guard patterns, memorizing searchlight rotations. The escape window was narrow, between 02:30 and 02:45 hours, when guards changed shifts and searchlights swept away from the western perimeter. July 21st, Bill told no one. Didn't say goodbye to fellow prisoners. Couldn't risk anyone's reaction giving away the plan. At 2200 hours, he descended into the tunnel for the final time. But now, instead of digging, he crawled forward, 62 feet through a space barely wider than his shoulders, dirt pressing from all sides. Wooden supports he'd improvised from bed slats groaning under the weight of earth above. Twice, the tunnel partially collapsed. Bill clawed through fallen dirt, terrified he'd be buried alive after 7 months of work. He reached the exit shaft, pushed upward. The surface soil gave way, and Bill emerged into Lithuanian night air. The first time he'd been outside the fence in 2 years. The forest was 30 yards away. Searchlights swept overhead. Bill crawled on his belly through tall grass, frozen, waiting for the lights to pass, then ran in a low crouch toward the trees. He was 10 yards from the forest when the alarm sounded. A guard had spotted movement. Searchlights converged. Dogs started barking. Bill sprinted the final yards and crashed into the forest as rifle fire erupted behind him. He'd escaped Stalag Luft 6. Now he had to escape Germany, 800 miles. No supplies, no compass, no map. Speaking limited German, wearing a tattered British uniform that marked him as an escaped POW subject to execution on sight. But Bill Ash had spent 7 months digging with a spoon. 800 miles was nothing compared to that. Bill ran through Lithuanian forests for 6 days, moving only at night, hiding during daylight, eating berries and drinking from streams. He navigated by stars, heading southwest toward Poland, hoping to reach partisan networks rumored to operate in the region. On the 7th day, exhausted and starving, Bill approached a farmhouse seeking food. The farmer took one look at his British uniform and made a choice. He could hide this escaped prisoner, risking execution for his entire family if caught, or he could report him to the Germans. The farmer gave Bill bread, water, and directions to a partisan contact 15 miles west. Then warned him, "The Gestapo has orders to shoot escaped POWs on sight. Don't get caught." Bill made it another 40 miles before German soldiers captured him at a checkpoint on July 29, 1944. 8 days of freedom, 46 miles traveled. He was returned to Stalag Luft 6 on August 2, 1944. The guards beat him, threw him in solitary confinement for 60 days on reduced rations. The commandant stood outside Bill's cell and said, "You wasted 7 months digging for 8 days of freedom. Was it worth it?" Bill, bruised and starving, smiled. Every second. Because here's what the Germans didn't understand. Bill hadn't been trying to escape captivity. He'd been refusing to accept it. There's a difference. In October 1944, as Soviet forces advanced toward Lithuania, the Germans evacuated Stalag Luft 6. They force-marched prisoners west in freezing conditions, hundreds of miles through snow, minimal food, men dying by the roadside. Bill escaped during the march, was recaptured 3 days later. They transferred him to a new camp. He escaped again, was recaptured, each time solitary confinement, each time beatings. Each time the guards asked why he kept trying when escape was clearly impossible. Bill never had a good answer. Just shrugged and said, "It's what I do." Liberation came on May 2, 1945, when British forces overran the camp where Bill was being held. He walked out of captivity for the last time. Gaunt, scarred, 30 pounds underweight but unbroken. They flew him to England, debriefed him, wanted to send him home to America. But Bill insisted on one thing first. He returned to the remains of Stalag Luft 6, now abandoned, to find his tunnel. It was still there. Collapsed in places but intact, 62 feet of hand-dug earth, the entrance still hidden beneath the barracks floorboards, and at the tunnel's end, embedded in the dirt where Bill had dropped it during his final crawl, the spoon, 3 inches long. Edges worn smooth, handle nearly broken, covered in rust and dirt. Bill picked it up and kept it for the rest of his life. William Ashe returned to America in June 1945. He could have been celebrated as a hero, the pilot who escaped with a spoon. But Bill never talked about it. When people asked what he did during the war, he'd say, "I flew planes, got shot down, came home." He finished his journalism degree, became a writer, married, raised children, lived quietly in California. The spoon sat in a drawer in his office, never displayed, never explained, just there. In 1974, 30 years after his escape, a historian researching POW camps found records of Bill's 13 escape attempts and tracked him down for an interview. "Why did you keep trying?" the historian asked. "After the 5th attempt, the 10th, surely you knew the odds of success were almost zero." Bill thought for a long moment. "I kept trying because the alternative was accepting that they'd won, that I was defeated, that I'd spend the war sitting in a camp waiting to be rescued. And I couldn't accept that. Not because I'm brave or special, I'm not, but because once you accept defeat, you've already lost everything that matters." And the spoon?
Why a spoon?
Because it was what I had. People think you need perfect tools to accomplish impossible things. You don't. You need any tool and absolute refusal to quit. The spoon didn't dig that tunnel. Stubbornness did. The spoon was just the instrument. Do you regret it? 7 months of work for 8 days of freedom? Bill smiled. You're asking the wrong question. It wasn't about the 8 days. It was about the 7 months. Every night I dug, I was free, because I was choosing my fate instead of accepting theirs. The Germans could lock my body in a camp, but they couldn't lock my spirit. The tunnel wasn't an escape route. It was proof that I hadn't surrendered. William Franklin Ashe died in 2010 at age 93 in his California home. His obituary mentioned his RAF service and his writing career. It didn't mention the spoon, but at his funeral, his daughter placed something in his coffin, a bent, rusted tin spoon 3 inches long, edges worn smooth from scraping frozen Lithuanian earth. She explained to the mourners, "Dad kept this spoon in his desk for 66 years. When I asked him why, he said, 'That spoon represents the most important thing I ever learned. Freedom isn't given. It's taken. One spoonful at a time, one night at a time, and as long as you're still digging, you're not defeated. The spoon was buried with Bill, and somewhere in Lithuania, beneath what used to be Stalag Luft 6, a collapsed tunnel still exists. 62 feet of earth moved one, handful at a time, by a man who refused to accept that impossible meant possible. Think about what you'd do with just a spoon and impossible odds. Bill Ash spent 7 months digging for 8 days of freedom, because those 8 days proved he was unbreakable. The Germans could capture his body, but never his will. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. Drop a comment about a time you refused to quit even when success seemed impossible. Share this so Bill Ash's name lives on. So a pilot who escaped with a spoon is never forgotten. The lesson isn't that Bill succeeded. The lesson is that he tried. 13 times he was captured. 13 times he tried again. Because defeat only happens when you stop digging. Bill Ash moved 12 tons of earth with a bent spoon. What's your excuse? The spoon didn't dig the tunnel. The refusal to surrender did. The spoon was just